Ready, and to share with you some tools and information today around creating really future-ready collective impact and doing really future-focused systems change work in your community. And how do you do that planning long term without clear authority? So, diving in, I want to just share a little bit about where I'm coming from. So I'm Lynn DeBills, and I'll be guiding you today. I'm a visioning strategist at Future Good, and I'm here with some of my colleagues on the call as well. I'm a trained results-based facilitator, so that's how I approach a lot of my work is results focused. And I've done much of my collective impact work with Cradle to Career initiatives, specifically in the Strive Together network, and have gotten to see communities doing this work across the country. I'm primarily from the children, youth, and family space. My undergrad is in social work, but I started with engineering, and that is a story for another time. But I approach systems change work like a scientist. And on top of that social work lens, I've layered studies in intercultural family development and an MBA in social impact management. And like many of you, my career has been rooted in service. So I'm a proud two-time AmeriCorps member and returned Peace Corps volunteer. And the other thing that's constantly on my mind is I'm always thinking about the cultural context and the containers that we come to places in and that we put others in, and how those identities and contexts ultimately shape us and our perspectives. So, whether that's globally, across nations or regions or race and ethnicity, gender, or other aspects. I've had that opportunity to live in multiple countries and regions of the US and have seen this work all over. So I know we're all bringing our own identities today and narratives that we hold. And sometimes those can guide us and sometimes they restrict us, right? So that's a little bit about me, and I'm excited to um, start sharing about our topic and hear also who's in the room today. So, our results for today, I want to ground in why long-term visioning is really critical in collective impact work and compare what I've typically seen to what I know can happen when some of Futurism's tools are brought to this space. And I want you to have the opportunity to identify at least one new tool or framework to use that you can integrate into your work. And hopefully, you leave with a renewed sense of possibility and clarity too. So, that is where we're heading today. I'd love to know who's in the room. So, I invite you to share in the chat whatever information you feel excited to share. So, name, organization, role, location, if you like, and anything about what brought you here today. Great to see. All right. Agency. Yeah, that sense of agency is really helpful. And I think that would be helpful for all of us. Great. We have a few parts of the country represented, which is great. Oh, good, Claire. You brought us out east too. Love to see that. Yeah, that uncertainty, Lisa, that you're working through. We're all feeling it. Great. Thanks, Kayla. Oh, you're bringing in Hawaii. This is great. And already leading collective impact for Alice households. And Alice is an acronym used by the United Way usually. And Kayla, I know I'm going to get the acronym wrong, so feel free to drop that in the chat. All right. I would love to hear from folks. Thank you. Okay. I would love to hear out loud, and I know folks are feeling like it's a cameras off day, and that's fine. I totally get it. Um, but if you're currently engaged in collaborative or place-based or collective impact work, what's keeping you from being grounded in the future? Love to bring voice to that. So if you're brave and want to unmute and come into the room, thanks, Kayla, for that acronym. I know the meaning and what it is. I knew I would get the acronym wrong. But what's keeping you from being really, really grounded in the future if you're leading collective impact work?
Hi, Len. I'll share. This is John Romano, Disaster Central.
Go ahead, John.
And yes, we're working with state agencies and also with other nonprofit organizations in who have a vested interest in greater resiliency for vulnerable populations and disasters. So we're the way we have chose to do it is through uh, speaking engagements uh, via live or virtual, and just sort of getting out educational material at large. And given the funding landscape, we also are looking for collaborations with other nonprofits who have a similar mission as ours, in particular working with these vulnerable populations.
Hmm. Thanks, John. I appreciate that context. And I'm curious, can you share when you're engaging with groups um, on the ground, what's your observation in terms of what's keeping them from being really future focused in their work?
Well, I think given all the things that are going on, it's mental bandwidth. This is we're in an attention economy now, and people are kind of, it seems to me that people are having to really choose their choose their tribes because there's just so much going on, and so we're just sort of aligning ourselves with those particular tribes who are working on one issue or another. But really, it's been really about getting attention, online in particular. You know,
Yeah,
try to
yeah.
do it, you know, uh, non-virtually, but still, it's it's hard to get people's attention.
Thank you. Yeah, people's attention spans are very short. It's that mental bandwidth. And when you can't be an advocate and think of a solution for everything, you have to think a little bit more incrementally and more in a siloed way. Um, Patricia, did I see you raise your hand before? I'd love to hear from you.
Um, I did, and I think for me, I've worked with a lot of Latino-led and immigrant organizations in the border region, in the San Diego border region, as well as I've worked this in the last few months with a collaborative around the LA fires. And I think uncertainty and fear is kind of keeping people from looking long term, and that it feels kind of privileged, to have those conversations of what would an ideal future be and stuff when people are suffering so badly. You drive down the street and houses are completely burned down, or and businesses, or your Head Start program, two kids, parents, two sets of parents have been kidnapped by ICE. And so having these conversations feels like a luxury in a time of crisis.
Mm, yeah, thank you. I appreciate you speaking that into the room. And when we think about yeah, even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like when you're working to make sure you are fed and housed, it's often hard to think future focused. And our brains are really just trying to keep us safe and alive. And then I see a lot in the chat, getting stuck in the day to day, that short-term solution thinking. Sometimes people have a hard time zooming out and looking longer term or at the system level. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So we know that, oh, Lisa, go ahead.
I was just about to lower my hand. I am here sort of as a proxy for a client organization that is child welfare. They serve the Quad Cities in Illinois and Iowa. So they have a progressive state and a more right-leaning state that they are trying to work with. They get most of their funding through either HUD or state, federal pass-through, pass-down funds. And they certainly recognize that philanthropy's got to be a much larger piece of what they've got to do. But in the notion of scenario planning, there are a whole lot of variables. It feels to them like they know that that need is going to increase. They know that funding is going to decrease. They know that hiring may get more difficult since they are not in a highly populated area. So I'm here to see what I can take back to them.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think the reason why collective impact was kind of codified as a model is because there are these really complex challenges that exist within complex systems. I mean, communities across two states. I used to work on the Southeast Wisconsin border, so Southeast Wisconsin and Northeast Illinois, and yeah, things are split up by programs are split up, funding is split up by these neat county state borders, and human communities just don't exist like that. And so the challenge is how do you work through, within, around those systems to bring folks together around the table to solve that challenge. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you chiming in and just sharing some of the things that can get in the way of being really future focused. So, I want to kind of baseline what I mean when I'm saying the words collective impact. And many of you have probably seen this before. It's from the Collective Impact Forum, but just gives us some shared context for the tools I'll introduce in this session. So, when I mention collective impact, I'm thinking of a network of community members, organizations, and institutions that are working to advance equity. And they do that by learning together, aligning, and integrating their actions. And their focus is around population level and systems level change. So it's often cross-sector. It is most often outside of just organizational boundaries. It's working across and together around a large table to work on a solution for a challenge at the systems level. And what collective impact looks like in action is guided typically by these 5 conditions. So that group is coming together around a common agenda. They all have defined what success looks like. They've defined how we're going to measure it. So they're using shared measurement. They're typically very data heavy. They're fostering mutually reinforcing activities, and I think this is the condition that is often hardest to get because it's not just, all right, we're each doing our work alongside each other. It's really thinking about the systems level and making sure that activities are mutually reinforcing and data driven. There's continuous communication, and that means there's a lot of focus on trust and relationship building. There are long histories of organizations and communities and groups of folks not getting along or being mistrusting. And so collective impact really focuses on building that trust again within a community. And then lastly, it has a backbone organization or backbone team leading the work. And those are folks that really convene and facilitate around alignment. They're not implementing programs. It's a kind of the central backbone. And with these 5 conditions, equity is at the center and woven in to all of them. So that's kind of my baseline of what do I mean when I say collective impact? This type of work is often called place-based work or collaborative systems change work. And the more used terms on the ground are if you hear someone talking about a coalition or a collaborative or network, they may be using a collective impact model. And there are some coalitions and collaborations and networks that don't use a collective impact model. So this is our glossary for today and where we're headed. All right, so I want you to think about if you are engaged in collaborative or collective impact work, how much is it currently rooted in the future? And I invite you to just keep that in mind. So I'm going to share 2 tools today that can be helpful, and in my experience, I think would be greatly helpful for folks working in the collective impact space. And also, I see in the chat, thank you, Patricia. Many use a hybrid approach. So many communities do like a pseudo collective impact. There are lots of different ways to approach this work. So thanks, Patricia. So this first tool that I'm sharing, if you've been on webinars with Trista or done other work with Future Good, you've likely seen this 2 curves framework. And I'm going to show you kind of how I would use this framework in collective impact compared to how the work is typically approached. So this 2 curves framework, it gets us through this messy middle from current reality to our future by taking us through a few steps. But here's what I normally see on the ground. And I'd love to know in the chat or like thumbs up or head nods if this is what you see too. And I've seen a lot of collective impact models. They start really heavy in current reality and they're really focused on the data. Sometimes that can be called the problem loving, right? They're really focused on what's currently happening. And then they set a target. They put a stake in the ground around, all right, currently we see really inequitable outcomes. We want to put a stake in the ground and have more equitable outcomes by 2030, for example. And this is where communities start. They'll then, over the course of a few years, implement that common agenda, the shared measurement, continuous improvement, continuous communications. And it's kind of, let's see how close we can get, right? And this work is hard. This work is really, really hard. And so this approach, it can work if you're improving outcomes, very helpful. But I want to show you how the two curves work. The two curves framework might help here. We also see right here, I have this like beautiful straight arrow. We know the work is more like this, going all over the place. It's a roller coaster, right? So where the two curves framework comes in is inviting communities, instead of starting with the current reality, starting with that 30-year vision and getting really, really clear there and building that shared understanding of what do we mean when we say, for example, we want to solve the childcare crisis or the challenges. Like, what does that vision really look like? Because one person might have a completely different vision from the other. So this is where we invite groups to spend time getting really clear in that strategic vision. Then go backwards and think about, okay, if that's the vision we want to see, what future signals would we look for now to know we're heading in that direction? And that can help to build that futurism muscle collectively, and can help a community to know, all right, based on our vision, like here's what we're looking for. And then moving into, all right, what's the current reality? Let's understand the data, but from a really asset framed approach. Because then the fourth step is really thinking about what's working well and what do you want to keep in the future. So it's a bit, it's a different approach than the one I shared before, which was my observations and experience in community. But the two curve framework can really help a group be very grounded in that future you're trying to create, which helps get people out of that incremental thinking. So I want to pause and I want to invite, I would love to hear folks' thoughts, and I invite you to share, unmute and share. So when you think about the collective impact work you are leading or in your community, how might rooting more in that long-term vision transform the work and what might it unlock?
This is Patricia again, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I've worked with a lot of different migrant and refugee communities. And if you start on the vision piece, like what does safety look like, or what is, it can be a simple question, or when was a time you felt proud about being a parent, and they kind of tell you the stories. You're starting in a more positive place. So it kind of gets them out of that fear, especially in a time like now. I know I said earlier that for some it feels like luxury, but people are looking for that joy and that excitement. And so if you can plan kind of from that feeling versus a feeling of fear, it helps.
Hmm. Yeah, and that can help create just safety for your brain to be able to even go there, right? Megan, I see you shared, this could help us stay more focused. Like, is the thing we want to do going to truly move us toward that 30-year vision? Yes, absolutely. And Lisa, I see your question and I'm holding it. I would love to hear. Chrissy, go ahead.
Yeah, what I love about the long-term visioning piece is that when you when you set your visioning out like 30 to 50 years in the future, the way you look at your assets in the present is different. So I think it does really impact what we see in the current reality when you really crystallize that future vision piece further than we normally do.
Thank you. I'm curious, can you say more about that? Do you have an example in mind about how a community might see its assets differently when they're rooted in the future?
I mean, I have a current example in mind, just in some work that I've done, like folks get a little bit lost in the current state. So it's really um it can feel like it would be good to go out 30 years, but like people are a little bit hesitant to go out even 3 years, right? But I think the invitation to go 30 would really push the group to um, have some important conversations about like who's at the table and how do we work together? Like what are our norms around language and things like that that just don't happen when we're just looking at that like 3 to 5 year parameter.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, and I think of how our workforce has changed so much, and a 3 to 5 year timeline. I think oftentimes people are like, I don't even know if I'm going to be in this role or in this organization in 3 to 5 years. Trista, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that especially now when there's so many challenges that organizations are facing, people say things like, I think it's irresponsible for us to look 30 to 50 years in the future when, the challenge is right in front of our face. But I've been leaning a lot on an Alice in Wonderland quote that's something like, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which direction you go right now. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are in this minute, where you're just reacting, but you may be reacting in a way that is not pushing you towards your ideal future. And so if you spend just a little bit of time focused on the long-term future, we say 5% of your time for the future, most of your time can be about all of the things, usually fires that are on your plates in this moment. But that long-term future is grounding you and how do I show up in this moment? And I think that is especially important when you have too many things on your plate and there are too many challenges that you're pushing against.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I see a couple questions actually in the chat, and I would love to tap the wisdom of the group because I know there are so many wise folks in here. There's one question about like, what do we mean when we say assets-based discussion? And I know someone in here can answer that and bring their wisdom in. And then also, what do we mean when we say appreciative inquiry, which Penny had shared as well. So I invite you to keep going in the chat. And Patricia, I see you shared some discussion questions too that are especially future rooted. Awesome. Thanks. I'll invite folks to chime in the chat. And I'm going to share another tool that um, may be helpful. This is based on my experience, where I see some opportunities for collective impact partnerships or efforts to bring in more futurism tools. And I wish I could take credit for this one, but I can't. I found it in an article. So I love a good academic research journal. This tool is the combination of layering two approaches together. One is the collective impact approach, and you can see in teal those 5 conditions of collective impact I shared at the top of the call. And then the other is foresight and using foresight tools. And although I'm a visioning strategist, I won't pretend to be an expert on foresight, but I know there are others in the room, and specifically my colleague Betsy, who has a ton of these tools under the belt too. So where I see opportunity for collective impact partnerships is specifically around these three areas: scanning, futuring, and visioning. And I've seen communities do the others really well, but I think that there could be merit in using some of these tools to move to move conversations forward across groups. And if you remember before, my here's what it looks like with the pretty arrow, and here's what it usually looks like, and it's all garbled up. Similar with this process, I would say one of the approaches I use is called collaborative improvement, and it is almost never linear, as much as my linear brain wants it to be. So these tools are, you can add these tools to your toolbox and use them at appropriate times for your coalition. So let's look at what scanning might help with, what futuring might help with, and what visioning might help with. So scanning is really taking the time to find and analyze signals of the future. Which tips, so trends, issues, plans, projections, are relevant for your issue. And that might seem overwhelming to you. If you're like me, that could seem overwhelming. At Future Good, we use this lovely tool called the Google Alert. And I have a Google Alert set up for three things. I have Future of Childcare Google Alert, Future of Universal Basic Income Google Alert, and Future of Collective Mental Health Care Google Alert. And at first it was overwhelming. Learned I could change it to weekly. Very helpful. So by helping your coalition or group do this collectively, you're building that muscle and can then start to scan and anticipate what might be coming. Futuring is more about looking at plausible scenarios. So it's actually looking at, here are different scenarios that might happen within our work, and here's how we would react or approach them. It's always important to co-create that scenario planning or that space across many stakeholders. And then, like I said, it's with all of this work in collective impact, the biggest piece is building that collective muscle and that collective skill set. So whether that's the shared awareness of how your domain may change, or it's the collective skill set around using a systems lens, it's really important to bring your coalition and group along. And then visioning can be brought to that common agenda piece. But this is where you're really creating that preferred image of the future, our common agenda. Are we going to approach the childcare challenges, and what does that look like 30 years in the future? Again, can look very different depending on people's views. So it's creating that shared vision and then doing backcasting. So, all right, now that we have our vision out there, we know that we want the future of childcare in our community to be every child has access to high quality early learning, and practitioners in the field are making living wages or well above living wages. We can then backcast that and start to plan, all right, then what does that mean for our work right now? So I want to invite some voices in. I know I'm excited to share the tools, and also I'd love to hear from you as well. And I know there's a lot happening in the chat, but when you think of either the second tool, the collective foresight, or our two curves framework, how might these tools help support visioning within your own collaborative work? And what would it take to bring a tool like this in? And also, what might get in the way? And I would love to hear if folks have examples from their own work, your thoughts around this. John, go ahead.
Yes, and I can speak to this because just this past week, we were working on a collaboration with another nonprofit with a sizable budget, $10 million budget. And it turns out the long and short of it was, we presented a proposal to the organization to be a subordinate partner in a vision, that we had. And they're just, they believed philosophically, they agreed with our approach. And it just seemed that there wasn't, the knowledge and understanding, which I know is incumbent upon us to convey, but there just didn't seem to be the bandwidth. There was a willingness, but the bandwidth was an issue, internal bandwidth to engage in the initiative that we had proposed to them.
Great. And how would one of these tools kind of help move that along? Would it be the creating that shared future together and making sure you're both aligned?
Well, I would say creating the future, but I'm using the word but, however, the most we're involved in a network that is set up for just this purpose, creating collaborations with other non-NGOs or nonprofits. And I got 2 cancellations on the Zoom meeting. Third basically was a half hour was dedicated to discussing the proposal we had. We are in principle in 100% agreement as to philosophically, and then from there it just sort of lost traction, and we were invited to speak with a subordinate within the organization to talk about the technological aspects of it. And I realize not everybody's got an appetite for technological aspects of it, but it was as I described. It was a situation where, apparently not enough time was either set aside. I don't know what went wrong. Okay. I don't know where the wheels spun off, but there was just limited time to, even though we were brought together with the idea of, collaboration, and they were open to a collaboration. So something happened along the way, and I
Yeah.
can't really troubleshoot it.
Well, and I think back to some of the challenges you shared and others shared at the beginning of the call around mental bandwidth, right? Like there's all this complexity swirling, people have limited attention. So it makes sense that, yeah, sometimes that impacts our day to day and getting to that future. Trista?
Yeah, for a number of years, I used to co-chair a collective impact effort called the African American Leadership Forum, which was 1,500 African American leaders across all sectors working on a shared vision of the future. And the joke was that we couldn't agree on what color the sky was. So how are we going to come up with a shared vision of the future? And what happens when you dig into the long term is that it really is about the world that you're leaving behind for your children and your grandchildren. And there's actually a lot of alignment when you jump ahead to the future. In the short term, there's disagreement about strategy or what organization's going to get funding and all of those sort of things. And so I think there's something that happens with that future state that's really positive. The other part that was really helpful for us, and I think might be helpful for some of you in these collective impact spaces, it's the difference between authority and influence. And so often we don't have authority over our partner organizations, but we want to influence those futures. And so when you create a space where people can dream together, it not only aligns your collective work. What we saw with the forum is that all 1,500 people in their own spheres of influence were moving that agenda forward. And so if it was in their work at General Mills, if it was at their role as a school board member, if it was their role as a parent or somebody in the community, we were all pushing in the same direction. And then change happens really, really quickly. And so I think, collective impact efforts are such a important unit of change. And if you add a future frame on top of that, it really is an unstoppable combination.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting. I have my bookshelf right next to me, which is always helpful because I feel like I'm always reaching for my adaptive leadership book and some of the tools in there around influence and authority and getting really clear on role and then thinking and acting politically to get there can be really impactful. Um, I would love to open things up for Q&A, further discussion. I want to do a quick plug. This is the work that we're doing all the time at Future Good, is helping visionary leaders build a better future through visioning and retreats and learning programs. So we'd love to share more about that with you. And Christine, go ahead. I saw you.
So whew, it's a little overwhelming because so my work where I am in Randolph, we are fully embedded in the collective impact model. I actually had our technical assistance org on early. I think she needed to step off the MAPC. And part of why I'm at Future Good is to, yes, begin to understand this idea of thinking with the future in perspective, and then just introducing it. So I'm sitting here realizing I can't even frame this conversation yet because I'm still wrapping my head around it, but I'm excited to do it. And everything that others have said about the funding, about not being the ultimate authority in the decisions that are being made, but certainly being a leader within the coalition that that's all. I am going to continue to listen and tweak and talk and need help on even presenting the idea to folks because we are at the sort of a perfect time now where we're looking at the next funding cycle. We've wrapped up one period and are looking at the next one and beginning to have conversations around what is it that we think our community needs the most? How do we articulate that? What do we think it might need to be in the next 5 years or so? We're nowhere past the next 5 years yet, but the idea of going into 20 or 30 years and then backtracking, I understand.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. That's actually a metaphor for how collective impact work often unfolds too, is it's very adaptive and people need time to wrap their heads around, okay, what if I approach my work differently or from a systems level rather than a program level? And one of the mistakes I made early in my career around collective impact was thinking it could be applied like a cookie cutter and you just like step by step, do. And turns out it's a lot more complicated than that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Trista.
Can I jump in on the case making? Because that's my full-time job, helping people think about the future. First of all, I put the Future Good book in the chat. That's a free resource that you guys can share with anybody in your network. I've worked in nonprofits since I was 15 years old. And I think the part that is becoming clearer to many of our organizations is that the way that we've always done it is not holding up with all the volatility. And so when people say, oh, it feels new and different, and the answer to that should be yes, thank goodness, because the other way that we've been doing this has not been working. And we're living in a time of exponential change where change only gets faster and more intense as we go. And so you have to have a different set of tools, and anchoring in the future allows you to harness that volatility to get where you want to get faster. And traditional tools are not going to get you to that place. And so I know that this is such a mental stretch for people, but Every single person that works in the social sector is doing futurism every single day. All of your work is about changing the trajectory of the future. We don't call it futurism, but it is so innate to our work. And so I think that helping people understand that they totally know how to do this, this is why they got into this work in the first place, makes it less of a scary jump. And the intention of all of the future good tools and all of the team's expertise, including Lynn, is really holding you as you are moving through this transformative change. But you already have everything that you need internally to be able to do this. It's just a new framework to hold the work.
Thank you. Hopefully that was helpful, Christine. Other questions that are coming up or thoughts folks want to share or insights? Patricia.
So I just wanted to share that this is not that this model, and this has given me a lot of hope, and thank you. And that it's not only important for social service organizations, but also good governance and democracy promotion groups and collectives. I serve on the state of California's Independent Redistricting Commission, and right now we're kind of in a mess in California. Um, and And I found that when we did the work and we asked Californians what keeps you, what groups do you want to be with? What do you want to see? Who do you want to work with? Those were all kind of future groups and help people get out of the politics and into this vision of their communities, then allowed them to talk about what districts they would want. And so I just want to be able, I just wanted to share that this is broader than just social service organizations, even though a lot of times in my consulting work, I used to get very frustrated with social service organizations because when you did visioning, they always said, well, there'll always be child abuse. There'll always be, it was hard for them to let go and look to the future. And so I always shared how when I worked at American Cancer Society, it was one of my favorite jobs because we knew very clearly what our mission was. And I could say, no, this isn't about cancer. It's not about curing it or educating or serving someone with cancer. So I can say no, but it's that opportunity to really look at the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll also put a plug in too that these tools are really helpful at the individual level as well. So if you think about some of the, like life coaching things, like it is helping you think very far into the future so that it gets you out of that space that you're talking about, that stuckness that you're talking about that comes up in the political systems, right? Just creating that space and that safety to be able to do that can help. And it can help people work across aisles and work across tables and build alliances where you may not expect them. Any other thoughts or insights folks want to share or questions? All right. So before you head out, I do want to invite you to check out and commit to an action. So I invite you to drop in the chat, what's a future aligned action you're feeling more ready to take? Even if you're not in charge of something, what's something you're taking away with you today, or that you have hope around? And I also want to thank everyone for joining. Thanks for contributing to the conversation. And we'd love to continue the conversation sometime. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Yes, reorienting to 30-year instead of 3-year. That we're collectively building a better future together. Oh, first steps on plans for a social venture studio. Awesome. Greater ownership of stakeholders. Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you. Feel free to keep dropping things on the chat in the chat to check out. And if you've already checked out, I wish you a really, really amazing day and enjoy whatever season it is for you wherever you are today. It's autumn, but summer here in northern Wisconsin. Have a good day.